with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the summertime. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the summertime. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the summertime.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. Or, as we like to say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Great to have all of you here this morning. I also want to begin, as always, by welcoming and embracing all that you bring with you to our service, all of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs, your background, your experiences, your lifestyle, all that makes you who you are is welcome here in this church. This includes those who hear us say this each Sunday, of course, as well as those who might be hearing it for the first time. You're equally as welcome. And, of course, it includes those who are streaming with us this morning. So thank you for joining us. We're glad to know that you're here too. I was talking with one of our members during the first service who I hadn't seen for about a month, and turns out he had foot surgery and wasn't able to make it, but he was streaming with us. So if you're at home, we're glad to know you're with us. Before you take a couple minutes to greet one another, I did want to, in case you didn't notice while you were coming in, that our annual farmers market, a great fundraiser, is happening today, begins today. So check that out during our social hour, as well as all of the wonderful quilt artistry that's displayed back there. I think that's a great way to promote our farmers market. They go very well together. So thanks to everyone who's contributed to the farmers market, as well as those who've helped organize it, and to those who've contributed some of that beautiful quilt work back there. So do be sure and check it out. And I also wanted to ask our acting director, am I getting that? You've got a long title. It'll take me longer to say than to have you come up here. So why don't we just have Aria come up and make an announcement.
Good morning. So for those of you who were here last week, you have already heard at least part of my pitch. So please excuse any repetition. We still don't have enough facilitators for RE this fall. We're looking for a few more. And we need enough to do it safely is really the goal. When I went through RE as a kid and coming of age and OWL, despite the fact that my mom was the DRE and that I was later an OWL facilitator myself, I somehow managed to maintain this idea that every DRE has a magical reserve of volunteers who exist in the church because they love being with the kids. And as soon as I say it out loud, it sounds very, very silly. But it comes from this idea that if I don't do it, it's fine because somebody else will. But surprise, this time there's nobody else. It's up to you. I don't want this to feel like a guilt trip, but I really wish I could articulate for you the vision, the grand vision that I have, so that you feel about Ari the way that I feel. I can see it when I close my eyes. I can hear it, the questions, the laughter, the smiles of a truly interconnected community. And I get that this vision comes from a mind that is pretty singularly focused on loving kids. But if we don't reach for that, if we don't build a community together that really thrives and take ownership over that community, then we lose UUism. This is how Unitarian Universalism survives. It's how we pass down our values of a truly equitable and just world. It's how we ensure a compassionate future full of loving people who look around and want to do better. Last week, I woke up to a news feed full of live streams from Charlottesville. And to be honest, I spent most of the day crying because I don't know how to combat hate like that. And I imagine that you feel a lot of the same fear and anger and loss that I feel. But what gave me hope, and what continues to give me hope, is that I knew I was going to come to work and be a part of the facilitating of learning of our children and youth around voice and the democratic process through Harry Potter, of all things. And that this fall, our kids are going to explore environmental justice and music and compassion. So what I really want to pass along to you, what I really want you to understand, is that participating in the religious education of our children and youth is not just an obligation to be filled. It is an act of courage and faith and hope in the future. I hope that you'll take this as an opportunity to reflect on how you can be a part of the incredible journeys our kids go through, and think about what age group would fill your soul to work with. After the service, you'll find me in the front shop hall with a clipboard ready to sign you up and answer all of your questions. Please come ask me questions. I have lots of information to share with you. Thank you.
Now, please do take a few moments to greet one another. As always, make some new friends today, and if you are joining us for the first time, please don't be shy. We're a very friendly bunch, and we're elated to have you this morning. That's okay. No, take your time. Hurry up. Well, I do hope you'll stay after our service to visit more with one another during our social hour, but of course we do want to move forward by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world, and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found. And it has been found in a lot of really weird places right now. So.
Today's commentaries were drawn from my own The All Little Nature Chapel Facebook page. Let us always remember that we are one. It is in our power to feel the joy present in the lives of others, as it is also to experience their suffering. We have the ability to share in the happiness as well as in the pain of our companions on this magical planet of ours, and therefore to devise thoughtful ways to make a difference. May we send cascades of light to all. Breathe. In, out. In, out. Let us feel this light envelop us all. People, animals, earth, rivers, constellations, and every corner of our beautiful universe. Namaste.
Please stand as you're willing and able to sing our first in-service hymn of this morning. Here we have Gathered, number 360.
I would like to invite our young and our young at heart forward for a story for all ages. This week's story is called The Jug on the Rock, It's from Tibet, and is a good example, I hope, of being thoughtful together. A man carried his large clay jug full of freshly made yogurt milk. He walked down the streets of town calling, "Dara for sale, Dara for sale." People opened their doors with pitchers in their hands. The milkman filled their pitchers from his own large vessel and happily accepted their payment. He was a good man who shared his profits with his elderly mother even as he cared for his own family. By noon, the milkman was ready for a rest. One day, he set the jug down on a big rock and found a nearby rock for himself. He savored the momo dumplings his wife had packed for his lunch. He could hear the wind whistling and goats bleating, and a loud voice called, "Tashi Dele," or hello. It was a shepherd. Why don't you guys try that? Tashi Dele. Tashi Dele. That's going to come up again. And when I point to you, I want you to try and say it. The milkman replied with an equally loud, "Tashi Dele." The sudden sound of his voice startled one of the goats. The goat jumped up and bumped into the jug. Crash! The jug fell off its rock and broke. "My jug!" groaned the milkman. "Your goat broke my jug. You must pay for it." The shepherd had no money to spare. Just like the milkman, he shared everything with his elderly mother, even as he looked after his family. He replied, "You shouldn't have perched it like that on the rock. It's your own fault." The two men argued back and forth all afternoon. They could not agree on who should take blame and pay to replace the jug. Finally, they decided to take the case to court. Together, they walked up the path to the village square that was just outside the temple, where a monk could always be found. Monks were the ones who dispensed justice in those days and considered cases such as this one. The men bowed before the monk and asked to tell their story. The monk listened carefully and, rubbing his chin, said, "The milkman could have been more careful with his jug, and yet it is not his fault that it broke. Without it, he cannot earn what he needs to care for his family or his elderly mother. It was the goat, not the shepherd, who broke the jug. If the shepherd were to pay for it, he would have to sell his goats, and then he would not be able to earn what he needs to care for his family or his elderly mother." He continued, "If neither of the men are to blame, then it must be the fault of the goat and the rock. They are the ones who must be tried." The goat came willingly, but it took 20 men to carry the rock into the village square. By then, the entire village had heard about the disagreement, and many had come to watch the proceedings. At first, the square resounded with the sound of people greeting one another. "Tashi Dele." As they talked together, more and more people began to snicker and scorn the proceedings. Some shouted, "This is ridiculous!" Finally, a monk looked up to acknowledge the crowd that had gathered. He scolded, "Do you really think that I am going to apply the law to a rock and a goat? Do you take me for a fool, or are you here to mock our laws?" When he could see that his words had sunk in, the monk began to smile. "Each and every one of you who is laughing is guilty of improper thought. The fine is 1 gyatso, 1 copper coin." The monk held out his hands. For a moment, people stared in disbelief. Slowly, one, then another, reached into their pockets and their purses to extract the small coin. A single gyatso meant little to them. Each of them placed their coin in the monk's open hands, Soon he held a large collection of coins. The monk turned to the grief-stricken milkman. "This should be plenty for you to buy a new jug." Most of the crowd began to smile, and the next day the milkman could be heard calling, "Dara for sale, Dara for sale." Customers everywhere called out in greeting, "Tashi Dele." Thank you. Now invite you to sing our children out with hymn number 413, Go Now in Peace.
Today we have a special collection. If you open your order of service, you'll find a small envelope. Please use this if you wish to donate, and don't worry about licking it shut as we reuse these envelopes. Our special collection today is on behalf of Odyssey Youth Movement. OYM is a youth-led, adult-supported organization committed to creating, sustaining, and advocating for safe and affirming programs, policies, and services for the LGBTQ youth community in the Spokane area. This summer, Odyssey celebrates 25 years of working with, empowering, and supporting Spokane's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning youth. Your donation helps safeguard and uplift our youth and ensures that Odyssey can meet the ever-increasing need in our community. If this ministry speaks to you, we invite you to give generously. We now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community and our mission to the larger world.
Thank you, Michelina. We'll now kindle our candles of care for those who are on our thoughts and minds this morning. I had a request from Shelley McLallen, who's one of our members here, whose friend Susie passed away earlier this week and asked us to keep her in our thoughts. And I also would like to just kindle a candle or two or more on behalf of everyone in our world today, in our country. It's difficult to localize the tragedies to Barcelona and Charlottesville when we are increasingly one world. And I know those tragedies impact us all, so I just want to kindle a candle for everyone, for the whole hoop of the world again. So let's take a moment of silence on behalf of others, and as always, you're welcome to name them aloud if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion.
We are the light. Beyond the appearances, beyond the tragedies so much in evidence around the world, we are one. We are the light, and hold the magic necessary to do our part in creating a peaceful universe. Namaste.
Thank you. Oh, the dragons are gonna fly tonight. They're circling low and inside tonight. It's another round in the losing fight. Out along the great divide tonight. We are aging soldiers in an ancient war, seeking out some half-remembered shore. We drink our fill, but still we thirst for more. Asking if there's no heaven, what is this hunger for? Our path is worn, our feet are poorly shod. We lift up our prayer against the odds, and fear the silence is the voice of God, of God, of God. Now here's the chorus. I'm going to teach it to you so you can sing it with me. And we cry, Alleluia, Alleluia. We cry, Alleluia. Let's do that again. We cry, Alleluia, Alleluia. We cry, Alleluia. Lovely. Sorrow is constant, and the joys are brief. The seasons come and bring no sweet relief. Time is a brutal but a careless thief, who takes our lot and leaves behind the grief. It is the heart that kills us in the end. Just one more old broken bone that cannot mend. As it was and ever shall be. Amen. 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 And we cry, Alleluia, Alleluia. We cry, Alleluia. There will be no guiding light for you and me. We are not sailors lost out on the sea. We were always headed toward eternity and hoping for a glimpse of Galilee. Like falling stars from the universe, we are hurled down through the long loneliness of the world, until we behold the pain become the pearl, the pearl, the pearl. When we cry, Alleluia, Alleluia, we cry, Alleluia, crying, Alleluia, Alleluia, we cry, Alleluia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Yeah. Oh, Andrea has a CD back there. Oh, great, if anybody's interested. I think my phone was not on silent, so I just put it on vibration. Well, that was beautiful. After Andrea sung that for us the first service, we realized we just needed to eliminate the usual meditation and just let that song be our meditation today. So thank you so much. In between services, one of our members, Graham Taylor, came and said, I think the thing I find that is pretty common about your sermons is they're kind of like an octopus with all these tentacles. And eventually they come back to a common center. And I said, well, considering my philosophy professor, after he retired, wrote a book called Think Like an Octopus, that probably explains a lot. So first tentacle. In our society, but in much of the world, the notion that the head and the heart, that thinking and feeling are separate. even opposites, is almost taken for granted. It's like the air we breathe. It's essential. It's all around us, but we hardly ever even notice it, unless it's filled with smoke. Those favoring intellect can easily dismiss emotion as irrational, while those favoring emotion may consider reason to be cold, calculating, and without compassion. If you're familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator, which I'm guessing most of you are, based on the theories of psychologist Carl Jung, you'll know that the thinking type is considered the opposite of the feeling type. And if thinking is one's dominant function, feeling is considered one's most underdeveloped and unconscious functions, or vice versa, if one is a feeling type. Jung himself said that thinking, if it is to be real thinking and true to its own principle, must rigorously exclude feeling. There are others who would argue life's a whole lot better when, as sung in the animated film Thumbelina, you simply follow your heart. You're sure to do impossible things. That's as far as I'm going to go there. If you follow your heart, your dreams will fly on magical wings. When you follow your heart. There you go. Thank you. So I like the duality that's best presented in Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. One, because it wasn't sung and I don't have to try to fake it. But mostly because which is to be considered the best, heart or head, remains an open question. Said the Scarecrow, I shall ask for brains instead of a heart, for a fool would not know what to do with a heart if he had one. I shall take the heart, said the Tin Woodman, for brains do not make one happy, and happiness is the best thing in the world. Dorothy didn't say anything, for she was puzzled to know which of her two friends was right. That's me. So Dorothy invites both to accompany her on her journey. Both the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman, both the head and the heart. Each of us enters our own journey in an undifferentiated state, meaning that when we're born, we can't distinguish ourselves from anyone or anything else. But our awareness increases exponentially as we learn to discriminate between the boundaries of our bodies and our environments, as we differentiate ourselves from other and others. As we develop further, this sense of separation becomes less concrete and more abstract, so that we start creating conceptual divisions, like the mind-heart duality. Body and soul, matter and spirit, good and evil, truth and falsehood are other dualisms in this paradigmatic ether we swim in, part of the cultural mindset that we hardly ever notice. Dualistic thinking may be necessary for consciousness, but it can also lead to the sort of extreme divisions we've seen violently manifested in our world in recent days, in Barcelona, Spain, and in Charlottesville, Virginia. And to counter the mindset of separation and segregation that leads to such violence and injustice, to such hate and harm, we have to be reminded that many of the beliefs dividing us are artificial, like the lines that we draw on maps establishing boundaries that exist nowhere but in our imaginations. We have to be reminded that we're all human beings, that we're all male and female, we're all gay and straight, we're all black and white, part of one humanity, part of one world. Etymologically speaking, this is supposed to be the function of religion, a word that means to rejoin or to reconnect. Religion at its best is supposed to be about making us whole, about making our communities whole, our world whole, by healing the tears in the fabric of our societies, restoring the broken threads that tie us all together, and ever widening our circle of inclusion. By definition, groups that use religion to justify hate and discrimination are not religions at all. They are the opposite. For as the great theologian Paul Tillich once said, sin is separation. To be in the state of sin is to be in a state of separation. Sin builds fences and draws boundaries and segregates and divides and sets itself apart from others. Religion is supposed to tear down walls, to cross lines, to welcome, to heal, to make whole. Accomplishing this is embedded in Taoism and its offspring Buddhism, which use that beautifully familiar yin-yang mandala to symbolize our earthly experience as a unity of opposites, ever changing into each other, always containing a spot of contradiction, yet always recognizing the contradictions are illusionary, because in reality all is one. We just can't perceive this great unity with our senses because they're limited to our immediate surroundings, which is a very small circle of inclusion. So we must grasp the wider circle with our minds by making the link between ourselves and all our relations, by envisioning the whole hoop of the world. Unless you want to take a trip to the moon and see it for yourself. And that's where reason or logic comes in. A mental system akin to mathematics for making reliable connections between the things we think about. If the connections we make aren't sound, it tells us that too. Unlike emotions, however, reason is not natural. We usually think we have good reasons for our beliefs, but that's often because we mistake the feeling of certainty for being logical. Even Sherlock Holmes, the great Sherlock Holmes, makes this mistake with his famous argument, once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be true. You remember that, right? And I'm not going to go into the reasons that his conclusion doesn't follow from his premises here, which makes his statement illogical. I'd rather point out that what Arthur Conan Doyle's famous detective is actually describing here, eliminating all but one possibility, is our natural response to cognitive dissonance. It is our coping mechanism, if you will, against cognitive dissonance. So if you've been paying close attention, you'll notice that I just called eliminating other possibilities natural, even though a moment ago I said reason isn't natural. So unless I'm someone who doesn't use his words carefully or consistently, this must mean that I don't think eliminating all the possibilities is logical. Sure, the process of elimination can be useful in reasoning, but it's more often a natural psychological process than an unnatural logical one. Eliminating all other possibilities is how we cope with the discomfort of a divided mind, with the chatter of competing thoughts and contradictions in our own heads. As science writer Jonah Lear explains in his book, How We Decide, the default state of the brain is indecisive disagreement. Various mental parts are constantly insisting that the other parts are wrong. To cope with this internal strife, he says, we all silence the cognitive dissonance through self-imposed ignorance. In other words, we eliminate all the other possibilities, rendering them impossible until we are left with only one solution, which no matter how improbable we think must be true, because it's the only possibility we can imagine. Our self-imposed ignorance prevents it, so we are convinced that the only thing left, as Sherlock Holmes says, must be true. And that one truth, that single solution, derived at by unconsciously tuning out all other possibilities, provides us with a false feeling of certainty. And that's what certainty is, a feeling. As neurologist Robert Burton says, the feeling of knowing and its kindred feelings should be considered as primary as the states of fear and anger. Certainty and similar states of knowing what we know arise out of involuntary brain mechanisms that, like love or anger, function independently of reason. You understand what he's saying here? Knowing functions independently of reason. Certainty functions independently of reason. This is why I say that we tend to think our beliefs are reasonable, because we can't imagine anything else might be true. A few days ago, for example, one of the white supremacists who marched in Charlottesville last week responded to being disowned by his family by arguing that white supremacists aren't, in his words, politically incorrect, we're factually correct, adding, I'm certainly not a hateful person. He believes this, and that he's part of what he calls a new civil rights movement, and that his beliefs actually reflect his love for his family and for his country, because he can't imagine any other possibilities, and thus believes he has all the facts. I've searched my head. I only see one fact, because for him they are the only conceivable facts. That makes him feel certain that his views must be right no matter what anyone else says. So how then can any of us be sure that we're not deceiving ourselves in the same way? Unable to consider any other possibility other than the one that we believe is true. We can't. We can't be sure. That's the whole point. Which is why reason is such a powerful tool, because it's an objective method of checking the soundness of our own thoughts, taking an external tool and applying it to our own thought processes. So one quick test, for example, is to simply ask if the argument you're making supports something you already believe is true. Does the argument you're making support something you already believe is true? That's a clue. For logic is meant to help us draw new conclusions, to make inferences, not to defend what we've already convinced ourselves we know. That's the difference between reason and rationalizing. Rationalizations, Erich Fromm says, are essentially lacking this quality of discovering and uncovering. They only confirm the emotional prejudice existing in oneself. Precisely because it is rooted in our emotions, rationalizing, unlike reason, does come naturally to us. Just like any emotional reaction, rationalizing is involuntary and happens without us even trying. It's so easy to rationalize. Don't even have to think about it. And it's usually what's happening when we're convinced that our ideas are well-reasoned. And this is where the scarecrow, Tin Woodman metaphor breaks down. For it's not really a choice between head and heart. Unless one is a complete sociopath, we all have emotions. And most the thinking we do is but an extension of our emotions through rationalizing and through the feeling of certainty. Reason, or logic, if you will, is again not natural to us. It is a discipline that must be learned and practiced if we're going to be good at it. And it is something that most people never study, never get to study. Yet rationalizing feels like thinking. It seems so clear-headed, so we mistake it for good reasoning. Exactly. I always appreciate your support. So the real question is whether we're going to take the head along with the heart, since the heart gives us no choice. Do we want to know if our thinking is reasonable, or do we prefer that delicious dopamine reward we get from that positive feeling of being certain, or from the false sense of security rationalizing our preconceived notions provides? So the choice seems pretty obvious when I ask such loaded questions, right? But again, emotions come over us naturally, involuntarily, and usually uncontrollably. Questioning our presumptions doesn't. Being unreasonable is always easier than being reasonable. Reason takes effort. It requires study, exercise, memorization, practice. It takes discipline, which is a big reason so few learn logic. Another is that it requires us to question and consider the soundness of our own opinions, which doesn't feel anywhere near as good as the come-easy feeling of certainty, the feeling of being right and therefore righteous, along with the feeling we are justified in being angry at, even retaliating against those who disagree with us. Some, I have discovered, even become angry at the mere mention of logic. Understandably so, since it is indeed a genuine threat to that kind of self-imposed ignorance that Lyra speaks of. And some on the heart-only side think logic isn't spiritual, and that people who use it too much are stuck in their heads. I would argue to the contrary, since thoughts come as close to anything non-corporeal that the human body produces, can be shared non-physically, just as I'm doing now, and even transcend the minds they originate in to inspire other minds, that thinking logically is about as spiritual as anything we are capable of. And since reason, unlike rationalizing, leads to discovering and to uncovering, as Fromm says, it enables us to transcend the confines of our own minds so that we are not stuck in our heads. After the death of Aristotle, the discoverer of logic, his writings were gathered into one source that the compilers named Organon. Organon, from the Greek word meaning organ or instrument. Logic for them was a living thing, as essential as a beating heart and as beautiful as the sound of music. This great system of classical logic, celebrated logician Irving Copey once said, remains an intellectual tool of enormous power, as beautiful as it is penetrating. Obviously, in light of all I've said, I consider it beneficial to invite the head to accompany us on our journey. But I don't think it's necessary. Like other creatures, we can simply let our behaviors be guided by the emotional impulses and repetitive instincts and get along okay most of the time. Thinking well isn't vital. Right? When you go to the doctor and they check your life signs, they don't check your reasons to see if there's any fallacies. They don't ask you to form logical syllogisms. If so, Donald Trump would be dead. I couldn't resist. The Tin Woodman The Tin Woodman is coming whether we want him to or not. The only choice to make is, are we going to invite the Scarecrow along? All of this, however, is but a response to the dualistic question, which is best, head or heart? Like Dorothy, I don't know, which is why I do my best to try to include both in my life. But let's consider looking at the same question non-dualistically for a few minutes. Let's suppose that heart and head, that emotions and thinking are not polar opposites, but are different ways of experiencing the same event. In philosophy, this is called functionalism, which, to be brief, defines things by what they do, by their function, not by their intrinsic attributes. In doing so, the mind, body, or spirit, matter, or heart-head dualisms disappear. Whatever the mind, spirit, and emotions are, they are expressed physically. They are embodied functions. We don't have a mind and a body. They are one. This explains why emotions and rationalizing occur simultaneously, because they are part of the same experience. Feeling or emotions surge through our bodies. Emotions are a physical experience. They prepare us for action, even as our thoughts formulate to justify our response. Since feelings and certainty come from the same part of the brain, from the limbic system, they come packaged together as part of the same experience, the same reaction that suddenly alters everything about us. Our mood, our heart rate, pulse, blood pressure, our physical posture, our facial expressions, and our thoughts, our thinking. That's what happens to us when we experience an emotion. So yes, logic like math or reading or some other technique must be learned, but thoughts and feelings are already happening together. Two experiences of one function. Boy, I'm glad I didn't mispronounce that word. I'm going to make a note. Do not talk about functionalism after more than 2 beers. Two experiences of one function that begins in the emotional layers of the brain. The newest layer of our brains, however, the neocortex, the frontal lobes, unlike the emotional limbic system, is not autonomic, not in our species yet. The neocortex is part of the brain responsible, however, for executive function and empathy. What a combination. For considering the consequences of our decisions before we make them, especially regarding how our actions are going to impact others. Am I going to hurt someone? In other words, emotions, along with rationalizing and feeling certain, just come over us, and we suddenly find ourselves needing to deal with whatever mood they put us in. Thinking before we act, and especially about how our actions are going to impact others, however, is not involuntary. Thinking well doesn't naturally sweep over us. Wouldn't it be great if it did? It can. The more we practice reason, it can. It becomes more natural. Yet as important as executive function and empathy are for thriving in our community, they are not yet autonomic responses to our environments. The neocortex is new technology that still takes effort and energy and intention if we're going to make good use of it. Even so, what I find most intriguing about the neocortex is that it also combines head and heart, although at a higher level than our limbic system. The limbic system, again, unifies them through emotion and rationalization, two expressions of the same experience. The neocortex unifies them through, again, executive function and empathy. Why did those two things get put in the same place? if they're so different? If there's a dualism? So from a functionalist perspective, head and heart remain one experience. As I've come to this realization that we don't really have to make a choice between the two because thinking and feeling are one, and that thinking things through and having empathy for others are one, I've tried to figure out the best way of saying all of this without having to give an entire sermon on the subject. And I just now settled upon the term being thoughtful. Being thoughtful. Being thoughtful means both things, right? It means thinking and being considerate of others. When one sends a card, for example, or brings flour to someone who has been unwell, we say, how thoughtful. And if someone plans ahead, we say, they're thoughtful. Being thoughtful expresses both the emotional and intellectual quality of our actions. This is why I've come to see logic not only as a method of thinking clearly, but as an expression of love. I just said I see logic as an expression of love and compassion. Being reasonable is a kindness. Don't you like to be treated reasonably? Isn't it just to be treated reasonably? Being reasonable, according to my old philosophy professor, Wallace Roark, in his book about logic, Think Like an Octopus, says, the reason behind many bad things that happen in the lives of individuals and society can be expressed in the words of a blundering friend of mine. I just didn't think about that. We have a moral and social as well as a prudential obligation, he says, to think about that. For Dr. Roark, thinking well is part of what it means to be an ethical and a socially responsible person. It's part of what it means to be a caring person. Thinking well means being considerate, compassionate, thoughtful. Erich Fromm says something similar, that thinking is a form of productive love. And its function is to know, to understand, to grasp, to relate oneself to things by comprehending them. Fromm believed that knowledge is fundamental to love, that it underlies all types of love, that knowing as knowledge involves thinking well. It means being reasonable. It means being thoughtful. Reason, Fromm says, penetrates through the surface of things to discover their essence, their hidden relationships and deeper meanings, their reason. Ask yourself that question. Who knows your reason other than yourself, if you know it? Who best knows your reason? The people who love you. It's part of what love is. And when I consider all the troubles in our world today, masses of people supporting populist authoritarians, pretending that we're not in an environmental crisis, a continuation of age-old racist systems and the emergence of new white supremacist groups, the silencing of dialogue through things like Fox News and political correctness, the relentless will of some to take health care away from millions, horrific acts of terrorism against innocent people, and so much more. The word that now comes to my mind is that these people are thoughtless. Those who engage the world in these tragic ways are thoughtless. To counter and to help heal our world, we must bring both our hearts and our heads along by being thoughtful. For being thoughtful is a way to love one another. And if you think about it, it may be the only way to love one another. Thank you.
We do have a hymn about the mind and the heart, so I would like you to stand if you're willing and able to sing it with me. It's number 300 if you care to have a hymnal, or if you'd like to use our screen, either way is fine, with heart and mind.
To make our purpose understood, a mortal search for mortal good, a firm commitment to the goal of justice, freedom, peace for all. A mind that's free to seek the truth, a mind that's free in age and youth, to choose a path no threat impedes, where light of conscience leads. Our martyrs died so we could be a church where every mind is free. A heart that's kind, a song to search, makes love the spirit of the church, where we can grow and each one's gift is sanctified and spirits lift, where every door is opened wide for all who choose to step inside.
Breathe. Breathe. And trust in the magic of the universe, which is at work to bring about the new miracle you are seeking for yourself or for another, be it a new job or home, the end of conflict and the understanding of truth, a new beginning of any form, while taking appropriate measures to reach your goal. Breathe. In, out. Light up candles of joy and hope for today's blessings and for those to come. Breathe. Breathe. Do what you must, and then let go. The light will come. The light is already coming. The light is here. Namaste. Amen. Blessed be, Salam Alaikum, and Shalom.